Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today, well, it's all about trying to regain some control in this hyper-connected world we live in. We are diving deep into digital wellness. We've pulled insights from, quite a rich stack of sources, including a really comprehensive overview from the Renaissance Institute. And look, our goal here isn't to make you feel guilty about your screen time. It's more about equipping you, with a balanced framework, making sure you use technology intentionally, not just reactively.
That word intentionality, that's really the core concept here. When we talk about digital wellness, what we mean is using technology in ways that actively support your mental health, your emotional health, and your physical health too. It's about setting healthy boundaries, and
Yeah.
consciously creating a relationship with the tech in your life that feels balanced, so it serves your goals instead of, well, constantly derailing them.
And the scale of this challenge, it's truly immense, which is why this deep dive feels so critical right now. Let's just start with the sheer volume of interaction we have with screens. The statistics are, well, they're stunning. Sources are confirming the average American is now spending 7 hours and 4 minutes per day just staring at screens.
7 hours. I mean, just think about that for a second. That's roughly, a third of our waking lives, just dedicated to looking at a screen.
It's incredible. And if you're holding a smartphone right now, well, sources report that these devices get swiped, tapped, or, interacted with an astonishing 2,600 times a day.
Wow.
I basically automated this habit of just checking in constantly.
And that massive volume, that kind of use, it creates a really serious challenge. We see this clear correlation between increased social media use and rising mental illness, especially among young people. Though pinning down direct causation is complex, we should be clear about that. But the striking irony really is that we're experiencing this loneliness epidemic, and it's often worse while we're supposedly connected. You log off feeling, inadequate or exhausted, maybe anxious, not really informed or refreshed.
Yeah, that feeling is familiar. And the moment that phone buzzes, it just commands your attention, doesn't it? Which I think brings us right to the core conflict we really need to unpack here. The mobile connectivity paradox.
Yes, this paradox, it really sits at the foundation of a lot of our current tech anxiety. So on one hand, mobile connectivity, it gives us autonomy, flexibility.
Right.
We can get information, work, coordinate things from basically anywhere. It feels liberating, but that very freedom, that ubiquity, it constantly challenges our sense of control.
It really does feel like the technology is constantly trying to yank me out of what I'm actually supposed to be doing. Why does it feel so demanding?
Well, frankly, because it is designed to be demanding, mobile technology is developed pretty much entirely within this framework of the attention economy. And it's specifically built really to lure your attention, to pull you away from whatever else you're, planning to do. They want you to unintentionally abandon your work or your social interactions, even your leisure time, for their screen time.
Okay, let's make sure we define that term clearly for everyone listening. The attention economy.
It's simple, really, but kind of brutal when you think about it. It treats human attention as a scarce commodity, like oil or gold. Companies, especially the ones driven by advertising, by engagement metrics, they apply economic theory to maximize the time you give to their product. They capture your attention and then they sell it. They view your time, your eyeballs, essentially as raw resources to be mined.
Wow. That really reframes the problem entirely, doesn't it? It means we aren't just using a tool anymore. We're sort of the product being optimized for this attention capture. And that perspective forces you to ask yourself, what are you sacrificing for that commodity? What's the trade-off?
Exactly. And our sources detail the costs pretty clearly. People lose time for, real in-person activities, exercising, even just sleeping properly. Focused work suffers, or simply spending quality time with family and friends. If the tech is constantly diverting your attention, you are fundamentally missing out on real-life presence.
And that separation, that line between intentional use and just distracting use, that's where we define problematic behavior, right?
Right. Technology use becomes excessive, or you could say problematic, when two criteria are met. First, you lose control over the amount of time you spend on it. You just can't seem to stop. And second, you subsequently experience a significant functional impairment in your everyday life. This isn't just about feeling a bit distracted sometimes. It's more like when you start actively avoiding important work meetings, or maybe letting grades slip, or getting so caught up in some digital spiral that it genuinely strains your real-world relationships.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little unsettling, honestly. Understanding how these platforms are intentionally built to exploit our psychology, to keep us scrolling.
Yeah, this is definitely not accidental. The competition for our attention is just so fierce. So, algorithms are developed using some pretty sophisticated psychological principles, often patterned after the mechanics of, say, a slot machine.
Ah, the slot machine analogy. That feels so accurate because it relies on that variable reward schedule, doesn't it?
Precisely. You pull the lever or you refresh the feed, and you don't know when the next like or exciting bit of content will appear. It's that uncertainty, that unpredictability that actually drives the engagement, keeps you hooked. And furthermore, one specific design strategy that our sources highlight is something called the anger algorithm.
The anger algorithm. Okay, tell us more about that. Sounds ominous.
Well, it kind of is. The platforms know through vast amounts of data that content eliciting a strong, visceral emotional reaction gets the most engagement. That could be excitement, sure, or love, or humor. But outrage in particular is incredibly effective. It maximizes commenting, sharing. It triggers this immediate need in us to correct someone or validate our own view or just argue. If they can make you mad, essentially, they've pretty much guaranteed your attention for the next 10 minutes, maybe longer.
That's a perfect segue into the biochemistry side of this. The hijack, as you called it. It's not just the external design, it's what's happening inside our brains. Social media doesn't just capture our time, it seems to cleverly manipulate the brain's reward system. And the key player here is dopamine.
Yeah, dopamine is central, but it's often misunderstood as just the pleasure chemical. It's actually more accurately the anticipation chemical. It's what drives wanting and seeking, motivation, essentially. So when you hear that notification chime or see that little red dot, dopamine surges because you anticipate a potential reward, a message, a like, some new information. And interestingly, unexpected rewards lead to even greater dopamine surges, which is exactly why those variable reward schedules like the slot machine are so potent, potentially addictive.
Okay, so if I get that hit of dopamine when I check my phone, and then I put it down, what happens biochemically?
Well, your brain registers the loss of that anticipatory high pretty quickly. Your dopamine levels can drop, sometimes even below your baseline, and you might be left feeling a bit flat. Maybe exhausted, possibly irritable, too fatigued perhaps for real-life activities that require more sustained effort and offer less immediate reward. And at the same time, many users experience chronically elevated cortisol, that's the stress hormone. This can be due to FOMO, the fear of missing out, or just the constant low-level pressure of competing online, staying connected, managing your digital self, so you can get trapped between this dopamine craving and cortisol stress.
And this whole cycle is particularly risky for adolescents, isn't it?
That's absolutely true, and it really comes down to brain development. The teenage brain's prefrontal cortex, that's the area responsible for executive functions like planning ahead, controlling impulses, assessing long-term consequences. It's still maturing well into the early 20s. This makes adolescents biologically less equipped to resist those immediate high-reward impulses triggered by social media.
So when a teen is choosing between, say, studying for a test and checking TikTok, their brain development is literally fighting against their impulse control in that moment.
Precisely. And adding to that, adolescents are naturally, developmental speaking, highly attuned to popularity and social connection. It's a key part of that life stage. Social media exploits this perfectly by providing this direct, quantifiable mechanism for seeking social status, comparing yourself relentlessly with peers. It really is a kind of perfect storm, biological vulnerability meeting highly sophisticated attention-grabbing design.
But as always, we need to maintain balance here. Technology isn't unilaterally bad, right? It's not all doom and gloom.
That's a really vital counterpoint, absolutely. Research does clearly show that technology use isn't detrimental for all people or in all circumstances, not by a long shot. For example, some studies indicate that young people dealing with depression can actually benefit significantly from accessing others' health stories online, maybe through blogs or videos. It can foster a sense of community, reduce isolation. So the focus really has to remain on intentional use, mindful use, rather than just restriction across the board.
Okay, so if the problem is partly rooted in this deliberate design and our own brain chemistry, how do we actually build real-world habits to counter it? We need like a framework that moves beyond just timing ourselves, maybe.
Exactly. We need a more holistic view. A comprehensive framework, like the one proposed by Audrey Yu that came up in our research, highlights 9 different dimensions of digital well-being. It goes far beyond just tracking screen time.
9 dimensions. Okay, can you give us a few examples? Especially maybe the ones that sound like they extend past just basic safety online.
Sure. So beyond the obvious ones like digital safety and security, the framework includes things like digital health and self-care. That's about managing the physical and mental impacts. But importantly, it also includes digital emotional intelligence,
Ah.
which means being self-aware of how technology impacts your mood, your relationships, and then learning to manage that impact proactively. And it also includes things like digital creativity and even digital activism or civic engagement, thinking about how to use tech as a tool for positive contribution, not just passive consumption.
That's a high bar, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's about being a well-rounded digital citizen, not just a user. So let's look at how this might translate into age-appropriate strategies. I
Yeah.
know the Boston Children's Digital Wellness Lab has done work here.
Yes, they have some great insights. For the youngest users, say ages 6 to 9, remarkably, nearly 50% already own a smartphone.
Half of them. Wow.
Yeah, so the focus there really has to be on very hands-on safety skills, civility online, and practicing mindfulness around tech use. Parents should probably try to limit online relationships primarily to extensions of real-life connections, rather than purely virtual ones at that age.
Okay, and then the difficulty really ramps up with tweens, right? Ages 10 to 13.
It really does. Sources share 71% of this group own a smartphone. And maybe more concerning, about 40% are already using social media, despite regulations like COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which technically forbids platforms from collecting data from users under 13 without parental consent. So for this group, there's this desperate need to balance their growing drive for autonomy and social connection with clear, hopefully shared, and appropriate boundaries around tech use. It's a tricky balancing act for parents.
Absolutely. Now, for any of us, regardless of age, looking to regain some control, the sources offer several really fascinating strategies. They're often called self-binding exercises. I love this idea of actively preventing myself from doing something I know I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, they're basically techniques for building intentional friction or distance between you and the technology.
Huh.
Highly effective. First, there's physical self-binding. Pretty straightforward. Creating physical distance, moving your device to another room, maybe locking it up in a time safe during focused work hours or family dinner.
Right. The idea being if you actually have to get up and walk across the house to get it, that little bit of friction might be enough to break the impulse cycle.
Exactly. Then we have chronological binding. This involves setting intentional technology Sabbaths, maybe device-free evenings or entire weekends, or even engaging in something more intense, like a 30-day dopamine fast, which researchers like Dr. Anna Lemke have written about. This is more of a radical reset to try and shift the brain's pleasure-pain balance back, allowing you to find natural, lower dopamine rewards satisfying again.
Hmm. A 30-day dopamine fast? What would that actually look like in practice? Sounds intense.
It is quite extreme, but proponents argue it can be effective for compulsive behaviors. Essentially, for 30 days, you'd abstain from specific high dopamine activities that you personally use compulsively. That might be scrolling social media, playing video games, maybe even excessive sugar or online shopping, depending on the person. The goal is to allow your brain's reward pathways time to recalibrate, so that simpler activities, reading a book, going for a walk, having a conversation, start to feel more rewarding again without needing that intense digital hit.
Interesting. Okay, the final type was categorical binding.
Yes, categorical binding. This means limiting your tech use only to what's absolutely critical for a specific defined purpose, usually health or occupation, and strictly avoiding everything else on that device or during that time. For instance, maybe deciding you'll only use your work laptop strictly for email and spreadsheets during work hours, but absolutely no browsing news sites or YouTube on it.
Makes sense. Creating clear categories. What about other effective habits? Monitoring and reflection seem important too.
Definitely. Things like screen time journaling can be surprisingly powerful. Just tracking your time, yes, but also noting down how using a specific app made you feel. It's a great, pretty low-tech way to foster self-regulated behavior. You start to notice patterns. Huh, I spent 2 hours scrolling that feed and now I feel worse, not better. That awareness is key.
And for parents, the guidance always stresses establishing those non-negotiable boundaries, right? Like device-free meal times, device-free bedrooms.
Yes, those structural boundaries are crucial. But perhaps the most crucial habit for parents is modeling. Parents really have to demonstrate positive tech habits themselves, showing kids and maybe reminding themselves that downtime, focus, and being present are possible and valuable.
Before we wrap up this framework section, we really have to touch on the massive new frontier. Artificial intelligence, AI. Our sources emphasize that digital wellness education is rapidly having to pivot towards teaching AI prompt engineering, almost as a core new literacy.
It absolutely has to. Critical analysis skills are required now more than ever before, especially with the rapid proliferation of generative AI. We're just bombarded with information, some real, some generated, some biased. Learners, all of us really, need skills to evaluate content for bias, for accuracy, for its source.
Why is that specifically a digital wellness issue, though, rather than just, say, a media literacy issue?
That's a great question. It connects because if you can't trust the information environment you're immersed in, if you constantly feel manipulated or unsure of what's real,
Hmm.
your baseline stress level, your cortisol, can remain chronically high. That directly impacts well-being. Digital wellness requires a sense of agency and informed decision-making. We must teach users how to decipher fact from fiction, especially when AI can produce incredibly convincing, yet deeply biased or simply inaccurate results almost instantly.
Can you give us an example of that kind of AI bias from the sources?
Sure. Academic research mentioned has already found pretty significant gender bias in some generative AI art applications. When researchers fed these systems prompts asking the AI to create images of people in specialized, high-earning professions, think CEO, surgeon, engineer, the AI would overwhelmingly default to generating images of men, often older white men. It just reflects and reinforces the existing biases present in the vast data sets it was trained on.
Right.
We need to teach the next generation and ourselves that the output is only as unbiased as the data that went in.
Which means prompt engineering, learning how to ask AI the right questions, how to frame requests to mitigate bias, becomes essential for navigating this, for avoiding these biased echo chambers.
Absolutely. It comes back to control and intentionality. Prompt engineering is, in a way, a mechanism for taking more control over the information you receive, rather than just passively being fed whatever the algorithm or system wants to give you. It's arguably the ultimate form of intentional tech use in the AI age.
Okay, so to try and sum up this entire deep dive then, the ultimate goal of digital wellness, it's really not about restriction for restriction's sake, is it? It seems much more about fostering a mindful, a balanced relationship with our digital tools. So we can actually leverage technology's immense power while mitigating its significant risks. And the result, according to the experts we looked at, is achieving things like presence, balance, and genuine satisfaction in our daily lives, feeling good and functioning well.
Exactly. And that pursuit of balance, that leads us to our final, maybe provocative thought for you to consider. Our sources consistently note that some of the key positive outcomes of digital wellness include cultivating imagination, play, and wonder. So, if the entire attention economy is designed to fight for every single second of your available cognitive time,
Mhm.
we have to ask, is our creative imagination perhaps the last truly human holdout against it? We fundamentally need downtime, real rest, mental space just to refuel, to integrate learnings, to let our minds wander. So maybe we can encourage you, listening now, to consciously carve out some intentional time this week, specifically for unstructured play and wonder, because that might just be where true, robust offline wellness really resides.